My name is Katie Galan. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement for Better Business Bureau, serving the heart of Texas. And I want to thank you all for joining in today's BBB webinar workshop. So we have these workshops every single month. They're free of charge. Anybody can join these webinars. We encourage you to share them with people that you know who may be in the business realm. We try to keep these topics really relevant to what's going on in the kind of in the business cycle. So today we're going to be talking about podcasting. But before I jump into introducing our expert today, I do want to talk about the webinar that we're going to be having coming up in July. So this is going to be July 25th, same time, 1 p.m., 1 to 2. And this is going to be with Terry Moten, who's a great expert and friend of BBB, who's done a lot of great webinars with us. And so in July, Terry's going to be focusing on recruitment and retention for your business using AI as a tool. So we're really excited to have Terry back to do that. But for today, we do have Chris Dailey, who is going to be talking about podcasting for your business, how to do it, why it's important, all those great things, all that great information. So Chris is a podcasting expert for almost 20 years. He has created hundreds of successful shows with millions of downloads. He consults on economic development and serves as a fractional AI officer, AI prompt engineer, author, speaker, and game designer. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put in the chat and we will get to those at the very end.
Cool. Thank you, Katie. First off, I have to thank Katie Galan and the Better Business Bureau, the BBB, for making presentations like this available. I cannot say enough about all the good that these programs do to help businesses succeed. I mean, and the price is right, right? So I won't bore you with a lot of the details about me. Katie mentioned I'm a podcast pioneer. I was the 5th person to ever do a podcast, and a lot of people go, "Ooh, that's amazing!" Like, not so much. I was just one of the nerds who was trying it out really early. August will be 20 years, as she mentioned, hundreds of shows, thousands of episodes, multiple millions downloads. Wrote a few books. Do a lot of fun stuff. I'm just, I'm digging life. So what are podcasts and how did they start? Well, it originated fall of 2004, like I mentioned on the other slide. 2 gentlemen, Dave Weiner and Adam Curry. Adam Curry, you may know the name. He was a former MTV VJ. Yeah, he did Headbangers Ball, the early days of MTV when they actually played music videos. And he was a nerd also. And so we became friends online prior to MTV even. And him and Dave Weiner, who is a Silicon Valley nerd, came together and created this thing called podcasting. Basically, it allowed you to take audio content, attach it to what's called an RSS feed. And I know it sounds like, oh, this is going to be a nerd talk here, but bear with me. It basically, that RSS feed is a piece of technology. It's just a piece of code that if you look at the image in the upper right there, when you add a link to a piece of audio, it goes out to these directories here and says, hey, here's a new audio available. So iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google, Amazon Music, they would all get a notification that said, hey, Chris put out a new show, and they would grab a copy of it and distribute it to their audience. And you're thinking, okay, big deal. Well, it is a big deal because that immediately gives your show a global reach. And one of the things I tell my marketing clients, and I've told them for years, is it's one thing to be good at selling and marketing to your audience, but it is a force multiplier to get in front of somebody else's audience. So when you put out a show and you put it on your computer, well, maybe somebody will come by and play it, somebody in your household. But if you put it out on iTunes or you put it out on Spotify, you know the numbers, there's hundreds of millions of people listening there. So that gives you instant access to a big audience. And what's really cool about that is, unlike traditional terrestrial radio and other mediums where you have to tune in and be there when it's ready, this automatically goes to their phone. So I put out a show, it shows up within minutes on that person's phone. So that allows what we call time shifting. And that means you can listen whenever you want to. We'll get into that a little bit later, but the time shifted element is huge. It is a game changer for sure. So let's talk about what podcasting is not. It is not YouTube. This will likely upset a few people who think when they see a video of a couple people talking on YouTube, it's a podcast. It is not a podcast. That is a different animal entirely. That is a vidcast or a video cast. Yes, there are quite a few people who confuse the term and may do both at the same time. Joe Rogan now, he started just doing audio. That's how he started growing. But then he said, oh, I might as well record the thing and put the video out. And so now people all call it all a podcast. But the huge difference there is the cost to produce and edit. Video's a lot more expensive to produce, a lot more expensive to edit, and edits look rough, because if I'm sitting here talking to you and I want to take out one word in audio, you don't even notice. It's seamless. But in video, if I take out that one word, I'll suddenly jump way over to the side because, video doesn't transition very well. The other big thing that a lot of people don't know, the reach on audio only is 4 times better than video. And, it sounds counterproductive or counterintuitive until you think about it. But when you're listening in audio, there's a lot more concentration. When you're watching in video, like right now, if you're totally connected to this in video, you're looking at the screen, you're looking at the background, you're looking at other things. But in audio, you're concentrating on the words. So that means that when you, as a show host, are giving maybe a call to action or trying to convince somebody of something, they're more likely to take action and to do what you're asking because they're paying attention. So what are the ways you can get involved in podcasting? Because it's not just build your own show, although that is a big one. That is the absolute best way to reach and grow your audience, bar none. By doing it, you're seen as a thought leader. You're recognized as an expert in your field. It gives you credibility. And it's very similar to having published a book, but as we'll discover, it can lead to publishing books too. But it's much more personal than even that. You think about it, the connection you have with your audience in audio is much tighter. And again, a lot of this stuff we're going to dig deeper into, but just to let you know, it's huge. Guesting is the other one. Whether you have a show or not, you should be guesting on podcasts. It is such a valuable tool. It's a very big deal. It is what I call the secret sauce of podcasting. A lot of people overlook it, but if you do, it's at your own peril. And finally, the very least thing you should be doing related to podcasting is advertising in podcasts. If you're advertising anywhere, and I mean anywhere, I mean Facebook ads, I mean social media influencers, billboards, newspaper, whatever you're doing, rethink that and move that money to podcasts. I'll explain why later. The rate of return is so good. So I want to talk about these 2 shows real quick. The one on the top there, Lone Star Gridiron, that was that first show I started in fall of 2004. Since that time, tens of millions of downloads, and it produces a lot of revenue. It's a ad-driven model. The website lonestargridiron.com has been going now almost 20 years. I mean, it started as a podcast. Now it's one of the most influential sites related to Texas high school football. So because of it, I have speaking gigs. Next month, I'm speaking to the Texas High School Coaches Association at their coaching school. 20,000 coaches all gathered together in San Antonio. and I get to speak in front of them. And I'm not pitching podcasting to them or anything. I'm talking about coaching careers, and I'm talking about football and programs and stuff like that, because that's another passion of mine. So it opens a lot of those doors too. Like I said, you're seen as a leader. That other show, lower right, it's called The Marketing Drive. That's probably one of the most fun shows that I do, and I've been doing it for a while too. It's very simple in that when I'm commuting to and from a client, or frankly anywhere, I could be going to the grocery store, and if I think of something related to marketing that I want to talk about, I flick on my recorder on my phone and start talking. The listeners love this one because it's real. It's 100% me being real. I don't edit. I don't say, scratch that and edit it out. Instead, they hear the traffic noise. They hear me saying, oh, hold on, I got to merge. And then when I finish merging, I'll finish the conversation, but I'll talk about anything related to marketing. And I love doing that one. People seem to respond really well. And again, it builds brand awareness. So in these two shows, I've built a brand. In the Texas high school football world, I built a brand as I guess, an aficionado and a knowledgeable person about Texas high school football. In the Marketing Drive, well, I mean, obviously, I get to talk about marketing all the time. So I get that sort of impression that I leave with people. And talk about client retention. I've got marketing clients now, because I've been doing this show so long, who I've had for 15 years. And how do you keep a client for 15 years? Well, you do good work for one, but you also have to nurture those relationships, and nurturing relationships takes time. It takes a lot of time, especially if, like me, you have clients all over the place. I've got clients in Houston, I've got clients in San Antonio, I've got clients in Dallas, I've got clients in Missouri, California, New York, you name it. And I can't go drop in and say, hey, how's it going? Just checking in on you. But I can record episodes like this and they all hear it. So they've all got some sort of check-in, and it's a check-in that I've done, keep me top of mind, but I'm not trying to sell them anything. Now, normally the way people nurture clients is dropping in occasionally and try to sell them something else. This is completely different than that. This is about me checking in and giving. I'm giving free content. When you're a podcast host, you're giving free content to your audience, and that is remembered by the listeners. That is why they connect with your show so strong, because you're just giving. That builds your brand authority. That builds your credibility. And I say it is the major piece. I call it the cornerstone of your content strategy. It is so important. And we will definitely dig into that a little bit later, but all of what you do here leads to increased revenue, or whatever your goal is. I'm assuming your goal is increased revenue. So bottom line, podcast, grow your business. So these are just some of the shows I'm involved with recently. And that's a fraction. And that's because from the time I started doing that football show to now, I have helped, hundreds of people launch their shows, grow their shows, monetize their shows. And like I said, this is just a fraction. We've got economic development groups, we've got professors from the University of Texas, we've got business owners, we've got bookstores, you name it, that are out there creating podcasts, and they're doing it because it works. This headline is great. Americans who listen to podcasts 5+ hours a week. That's a lot. 5 hours a week. 22% of Americans spend more than 5 hours listening to a podcast. That's not Americans listening. That's the number of people listening is 56% who listen to podcasts, but 22% listen more than 5 hours, which tells you it's a growing medium. And it, speaking of growing, is expected to double to around 40% this year. So I think you'd be silly to ignore this powerful method of reaching through the clutter. There's so much out there. You guys know. I mean, whether it's social media, whether it's news, whether it's streaming channels, there's so much out there. And if you can reach this kind of penetration, and as we'll show you, you can do it inexpensively. I mean, again, why even think about it? And now the title of this one, Podheads Listen Throughout the Day. I don't know. I find it funny, Podheads, but it's goofy too. I mentioned during my drive, I record the marketing drive. Well, that's maybe 10 minutes of a drive, you know, when I'm inspired. Most of the time, though, on my drives, I'm listening to podcasts. This time connects me even closer with that podcast host. And think about it. After somebody listens to a few hours of your show, say it's 15-minute episodes, and they've been doing it for a long time, after a while, those are hours that they've spent with you, and they feel like they know you. And you kind of come across as that great friend they have. They may not have met you in person, but you still come across like that great friend. But you're a friend that hasn't asked them for anything. You're a friend that hasn't caused them troubles. You're a friend that just keeps offering helpful advice. And if at some point you need what they're offering or what they provide as a service, who are they going to call? Of course they're going to call you, right? I mean, why wouldn't they? Now let's talk about influence. Who makes, I shouldn't say makes, who influences people to make decisions? Well, before the advent of big media, the influencers of the world were parents, they were teachers, they were clergy, they were officials, you name it. But when media started to come out, all of that changed. Then early on, you know, with like television, it became Tom Brokaw, Walter Cronkite. When they would say something, suddenly America would listen and do whatever they're leaning towards, right? And I don't even know who the broadcasters are now, the top ones, because I don't listen to mainstream media. And that's another thing that has changed is people are listening more to podcasts than they are listening to anything else. But as the news people gave way to media personalities, movie stars, musicians, people like that. And so they took over as the major influencers, the celebrities. Well, not long ago, that power shifted once again, and it became social media influencers. Yeah. People whose entire existence is based on them being popular on social media. I mean, blows me away. But, and they're still powerful, don't get me wrong, but they took over as the top spot until very recently, podcasts surpassed them. In terms of influence, 75% of the people surveyed said podcast hosts were the most influential when given a list of all these different types of people. That's huge to know that we're that influential. And another study came out at the beginning of the year. Podcasters are the most trusted media personalities in the US. And we'll get into why. But I mean, again, that's not a high bar. Nobody trusts the media, right? But that's why people are moving to independent media like podcasters, because it's more trustworthy. So what do you have to do to make a podcast? What equipment? Because that's one of the questions I get all the time. I get people saying, well, yeah, I want to do a podcast, but, you know, I don't want to spend all this money on microphones and the studio and a mixer board and extra computers and sound deadening stuff. I mean, I just don't have that investment. And a lot of people still think it's video. So then they're like, oh, and I need cameras and I need lights. And I'm here to tell you, you don't. You do not need, you need that. That's it. My phone's not showing up. A smartphone. You need a smartphone. And the smartphone now can do everything a full-fledged studio could do just a couple of years ago and more. So that's it. The equipment needs are not big. They say that sound, even in video, sound is one of the most important factors. So you've got to have decent sound. Well, it depends on the show, right? I talked about the marketing drive. That one has background noise. That one has things in it but that's the experience we're selling, is you're in a ride with me in the car. So that's okay. But, you know, if you're having a talking heads conversation where maybe you're talking with experts in your field, you want better sound. So what do you have to do? Do you have to get all that foam board and put it all over and create this special room? No, no, that's one of the things that that I stress because I've been doing this so long. I've been doing it since it was the very early days. And because of that, we initially had to do things on a shoestring. One, there wasn't all the equipment, there wasn't all the stuff available, so we had to figure it out. And what we've discovered, you can walk in your closet with your cell phone and you'll get better sound than $1 million studio, because that closet is full of material which deadens sound. And I know it feels funky, right? You're standing in the closet recording something. In fact, the early days when I was doing it, I would go in there to record, and my wife would always joke, "Chris, come out of the closet." but but yeah, I mean, you think about it, you can, with that cell phone, you can bring a stool in there, have a seat. You can get an app on your phone that does that records phone calls. You can set up a phone interview with somebody and just sit there and have a conversation. And it sounds amazing. So don't get hung up on the equipment. If you're thinking, if that's what's holding you back, it shouldn't anymore, right? So let's talk about the frequency and the duration of a show. How long should it be? How frequent should it come out? Well, as far as frequency, that depends on the content. The sweet spot we've discovered is once a week. Now, if you've got a daily show, like there's a friend of mine who puts out a show called AI Daily, or AI Daily News, which gives, because the industry is moving so fast, there's new news every single day. So he puts it out. It's a 5-minute show. That has to be daily because it's changing so fast. But the sweet spot, as I mentioned, is once a week. And that's after 20 years of putting out shows, myself, other clients, other people who study this, and they pay attention to what frequency grows audiences. The sweet spot is once a week. That's the most effective for not only growing, but then maintaining the audience too, because, you know, it doesn't pay if it's new people all the time. How long should your show be? How, you know, the length, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to get, me and my friend are going to get together. We're going to do a show. And we're going to talk about football, or we're going to talk about some soap opera, whatever it is. And they ramble on for 2 hours. They think it's cool. They think it's amazing, but they lose their listeners pretty fast. Joe Rogan can get away with 3 hours. He can get away with 3 hours because he has guests like Elon Musk. He gets big name guests and they talk about big subjects, and they ramble, yes. But again, you know, when Elon Musk is rambling about something, he's still Elon Musk. So you still want to listen to it. And that said, I think I've listened to one of his shows all the way through, and it took me like 4 sittings. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the real long shows. What I've found, the sweet spot though, again, is 15 to 30 minutes. Because if you think about it, that's a typical commute. That's also a good time for going for a walk or going for a bike ride, walking the dog, doing some weeding in the garden, whatever it is you do as a hobby, you can listen to that podcast during that time. And again, that's been the most effective for maintaining your audience and then getting new audience listeners. So let's talk about the content strategy itself. Well, I mentioned at the top of the webinar that podcasts can be the cornerstone. You record your show, boom, you've got a completed show. It shows your expertise. It shows you're dependable. It shows you know what the heck you're talking about. You then take that, share it out on Facebook, share it on LinkedIn, share it on Alignable, share it on Instagram, TikTok, X, you name it. Share it to all those places. So now you've got a little bigger audience, right? You're going back to that same thing where you're always trying to get in front of other audiences. But you can go further. You can take that original show, and there's some great AI tools that do this now. You used to have to do it by hand, and we did, and it worked, that can rip up that show and pull from it 60-second clips, 30-second clips, things like that. And you can put them out as Facebook Reels. You can put them out as YouTube Shorts. You can, again, distribute them on TikTok, distribute them, all those same channels, but just as, hey, this is a cool clip from the show. This is maybe something funny, some interaction you had with the guest, or some clever, amazing, creative thing you came up with. And you use that to promote the show. And in the comments, you say, oh, yeah, this is from the show, blah, 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 and tell them how to get there. So you've got one piece of content. That cornerstone is the episode. That one piece of content now has created 20 to 30 pieces of social media content. So again, it's just a valuable tool. We mentioned guesting. I'm going to dig into that a little bit now. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation, if somehow you decide to ignore the truth of how revolutionary adding podcasting can be to your business, learn this. Guesting on shows is a gold mine. It is an absolute gold mine. Again, get in front of somebody else's audience. Now, it's not the size of their audience that matters there. That's not the big game. Yes, it is awesome if I can get in front of Joe Rogan's audience. That's a huge gain. But let's say you put out a show and I get in front of your audience and you think, okay, big deal. I only have 100 listeners. I only have 50 listeners. But again, the connection there is that the relationship that audience has with that host will help you immensely because they already trust that host enough to subscribe to that show. They trust that host that they're going to provide guests of great value. So you walk into it already worth a lot more. And one of the best ways to get on shows is to offer what's called guest swapping with them. You invite them on your show, the law of reciprocity kicks in, they will invite you on their show. As a podcaster, it's easier to get a spot on a guest show because you're offering them that swap. But you can do it without that. You can do it just as a business person. You don't have a show, you have no interest in doing a show, but you want to be a guest because you have some expertise. Well, there are some guesting services out there, and they charge, I've seen numbers $2,000 to $10,000 a month to find you opportunities to be on shows. They're not even guaranteeing you'll be on a show, which is insane. And I only mention that because you will see that, and I want to caution you, run away, because my company does that, and we find guesting opportunities for you, but we're talking $100 to $200, depending on the audience's size. So it's pennies compared to these people that frankly are just, I don't know, they're raping their audience. But when you guest with somebody or swap guests, you both grow your shows, right? You each get in front of a new audience. It is the definition of a win-win. And that's why we have guesting services to help you get guests on your show, but also help you get onto other shows. So let's talk about advertising and monetization. Well, the easiest route or channel to monetization, if you have a show that has built you up as a thought leader, that will convert listeners to customers because you have an expertise. They will reach out to you when they need that expertise, when they need your product or your service. So that's the easiest way, the low-hanging fruit, because you don't really have to sell really hard. In fact, you shouldn't sell. Excuse me, but you can also monetize by having ads in your show. So if you have a niche audience that some other advertiser wants to reach, they will pay you to get in front of that audience. So that's another way you could monetize. So perhaps you don't have a show where you're building yourself as an expert. Perhaps your show is, I can't, just talking about the Marvel superhero universe because you like doing it. Well, then your monetization method is sell some Marvel merch in there, get somebody to advertise on there. But there's lots of channels to do that. This is interesting. This too came out this year. And it's funny because I have to change these slides all the time because so much is coming out so fast right now because podcasting is so hot. 58% of listeners say they've discovered a small or medium business through podcasts, get this, before seeing them on brand or retailer website. That means discovered you. They are discovering small business directly through podcasts. 58% of the people surveyed said that. Bigger number, 95% of listeners come across a small or medium business while listening to a podcast and have gone on to make a purchase. Wow, 95%. Where else do you get 95% taking action on something you're promoting? How is that even possible, right? But that's the power of that relationship the audience has with the host. And whether you leverage that power to add income for your show or simply to increase your sales, that's up to your business model. That's something we need to figure out. But ignoring it, hey, that's just bad business. Now, this is a new study. I love this one because, frankly, it just came out this week. And it shows podcasting now surpasses all media on ROAS, ROAS. That means return on ad spend, 4.9x, which means for every dollar you spend advertising in a podcast, you receive on average $4.90 in sales. Yeah, that's average. So it could be better, it could be worse. But podcasting is the clear leader at 4.9x. Social media, 3.9x or 3.6x. So it's a full percentage and a half better. Radio, only 3.5x. So radio, again, if you're advertising on radio, if you're advertising on social media, you're advertising on traditional media, move that money to advertising on podcasts. And yeah, not all podcasts are a good fit for your company because you may just service a region or you may just service a specific niche market. There's a podcast for everything out there. We can help you find it. Let's talk about some more monetization options as a podcaster. We've talked about getting ads, and new client acquisition. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Folks who do training or coaching, anything like that, they take advantage of that new client acquisition model. And if you think about it, even though in their show, this may be a business coach, this may be a life coach, you name it. Even though they're not in there saying, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, just view it as it's a regular presentation to potential customers. Again, not a hard sell, but a regular presentation where you're giving information. And for existing customers, because you will have a lot of those listening to you as well, that's client retention. Subscriptions, that's another way that a lot of podcasters have started to make money. And you do that by charging people to listen to your podcast. Agreed, when you're brand new, nobody's going to pay because they don't know who you are. But if you've got a name brand, you've got anything like that, they will right away. So a lot of people do a hybrid where you give them the normal show, the base show for free, but there's extra content, bonus content behind that paywall. So that's one way to approach that. Affiliate sales, a lot of podcasters, the biggest in the world, use affiliate sales. They will run ads in their show with affiliate links. They'll say, this show is brought to you by, I can't even think of one. Whatever it is, one of these ready-to-eat meals or something. And if you go by there and use this coupon code, you'll get 10% off or your first meal's free or whatever. Well, I tell you, the reason they're using that code is to connect that customer with this show. So because that customer used that code, that company knows that show brought it in. So whoever owns that show gets paid. And it's a wonderful setup for both ends. One, as a host, you know, you can make some money. Again, assuming you have a good show and people take action. For the advertiser, it's an even better deal because you don't pay a penny unless you sell something. So yeah, there's a little hassle setting up coupon codes and stuff like that at the beginning. So they will try to make sure you've got an audience, but that affiliate sales can grow and grow and grow and get much bigger as your audience grows. Merchandising, that's another one we touched on. You can sell books, you can sell tapes, you can sell games, you can sell, you name it. We've got musicians who promote concerts. Fundraising is another great one. I've been doing a show now for about 4 years for the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame. That's a nonprofit, and each year prior to doing the show, their big fundraiser of the year was a banquet that they had in Waco, Texas every year. And, you know, it was a nice night. It was black tie affair and good food, great speakers, and they got to meet the inductees. Well, we set up the show where I'm interviewing the inductees, and we sold ads in the show. That quickly became their biggest fundraiser of the year and a lot less expensive to produce than this big banquet. They still do the banquet, don't get me wrong, but this is just a way to help nonprofits. Another nonprofit we just launched this week, the Food Bank of the Golden Crescent. We're doing one called Hunger Action Heroes, where they have a local sponsor. They have HEB sponsoring the thing. And then they're also selling other ads in it so that they can actually make some money off it and use those funds to help their mission of delivering food across 11 counties. So there's lots of different ways that you can monetize your podcast. I still think the best thing you can do as a small businessman, though, business person, is to be seen as that expert, and it'll help your business. So again, my name's Chris Dailey. Yes, it's spelled funny. I have to take my dad's word for that one. But, and that's how you can reach me here. The website there, chrisdailey.com, has links to all my other websites. So it's a good starting point. My phone number's there. Feel free to text me. If you call me, I'm not likely to answer because I won't recognize the number. But if you text me and say, I saw your presentation for the BBB, I will answer you pretty fast. The QR code there is a free offer for what we call our podcasting feasibility consult. And you take that, it goes to my Calendly, which basically picks a time on my calendar when I'm free. We will have a conversation about your business and see if it makes sense to do podcasting, and if it does, how to do it, stuff like that. Again, there's no charge for that. So go ahead, book a call. I'll leave that on the screen. And so now I am ready if you want to turn things back to Katie for some Q&A.
I don't see that we have any questions. I want to leave that open for just about another minute or so in case anybody has anything that they want to drop in there. Keith did say great tip regarding the closet. But a lot of great information, Chris. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this for everybody here. Let's see, I'm going to leave it open a little bit longer. Okay, we've got something here. Ooh, okay. What would you recommend as far as podcast apps to use for recording multiple guests?
For multiple guests, Riverside is a really good one if you do it from your computer. It just works better from a computer. Another thing you can use if you're doing interviews, and it's just, again, audio only. If you have an iPhone, I think it's available on Android too. There's an app called Tape a Call Pro, which I've been using for years. When it first came out, I started using it, and it was a ridiculous price. It was $8 for life. So I paid it. Now it's like $19 a month. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different tools. Definitely set up the consult. We'll have a conversation and figure out which tools based on the type of show you're going to do.
Judy also had a question. How would you search for regional podcasts?
Gosh, there's a lot of different directories out there. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're looking to listen, then I would go into whatever your podcatcher of choice is, Spotify or iTunes or wherever, and search some of the regional terms, like, search for Texas or South Texas and see what you come up with. I will warn you, you will come up with some weird stuff. But yeah, there's again, if you're looking to partner with them or be a guest on their show, it's just Google, and actually AI, ChatGPT is pretty smart. You can ask it a lot.
And then Jorge had his hand raised. I don't know if you had a question, but you are unable to speak if you want to.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that information. It's great. I am a vidcast guy. I actually feel better when I can see you talking than just listening. And I'm used to that. I'm used to looking at videos where people are having conversation, where they are talking, and I really rarely listen just to podcast.
Mhm.
So anyway, thank you. But there was one thing that you said that I like, that when you are doing the podcast from while you're driving, that you don't do any editing.
Yeah.
And that people like that. Well, I kind of like that too, and that's why I don't feel much problem with editing a video, because most of the time I don't edit it. So I just go as raw as it goes.
Nice.
But I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you.
Oh, you bet. Yeah. The non-editing is a very powerful thing, because everything on TV is so tightly produced and slick that it doesn't feel very real. And that's why podcasting is taking over, because it's real.
Thank you very much for this information today.
Thank you, Jorge. So Keith has another question in the chat. You mentioned AI apps that will scrape your episodes and create interesting clips. What should we search for with that? Also, do you recommend pre-recorded intros for each episode?
Yeah, again, it depends on the show. I have most of my shows are pre-recorded intros, but I've also had great success with editing in a clip from the show and then introducing who the guest is and then going to the interview. So it's a little bit extra work, but the response, people like that, because it like gives them a feel right away for what they're going to get into. As far as the apps for pulling transcripts and things like that, there's so many good ones out there. Descript is a good one for pulling transcripts, and you can do some editing in it. But there are other ones. Again, I don't try to memorize them all. I've just got a list that I keep track of. I'm happy to share that with you. But yeah, there's so many tools. And like I mentioned earlier, with AI, it's changing every single day. So the tool list that I used 2 weeks ago is different than the list I use today, just because the new stuff is coming so fast.
Hey, do we have any other questions, comments before we let y'all go? I want to make sure we take advantage of having Chris here if anybody else has any question. Give that just a few seconds. Okay, well, if y'all do think of any other questions, please feel free to get a hold of Chris. You've got all of his information there. Also, we will be emailing this recording to anybody who RSVP'd, so you guys should be getting this in your inbox in the next probably day or so. But I also do want to remind you of our webinar next month, which is going to be July 25th. And that is already up on the events page on our website, bbb.org. So you can already go and register for it. And that's going to be with Terry Moten. She'll be our expert that day. And that is going to be on recruiting and retention for your business using AI. So that should be a really interesting one too. So thank you all for joining today. And we hope to see you on our next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.